Percy was glad that the Fat Controller was not angry with him. "I'm sorry, Thomas," he said. "Will you be able to manage?" "I should think so," replied Thomas. "Yes, I'm sure we will. Won't we, Annie and Clarabel?" Annie and Clarabel weren't at all sure, as dozens of sacks filled with letters and parcels were transferred from the mail train to them. "They're very heavy," complained Annie. "I'm full," moaned Clarabel. "Percy is silly," they grumbled together. But Thomas remembered the time one winter when he wouldn't wear a snowplough and had ended up stuck in a snowdrift. "Don't be too hard on him," he said to the carriages. "We all make mistakes." Soon all the mail had been transferred into Annie and Clarabel. The postmaster explained carefully to Thomas and his driver the places where the mail had to be dropped off to be collected next morning and then delivered through the letterboxes. "Are you sure you'll be all right now?" he said. "Of course," replied Thomas. The fireman stoked the boiler and the driver opened the valve. Thomas's wheels started turning. With much creaking and groaning from Annie and Clarabel, they moved slowly forward. "It really is heavy," gasped Thomas. Fortunately, the first part of the track out of the mail depot was downhill. Before long, they were making good speed. The stars shone brightly in the winter sky. As the night wore on and his driver dropped off mail sacks at the stations, Thomas's load grew lighter. Annie and Clarabel were beginning to enjoy being out at night. They chattered noisily until the driver told them to be quiet. When Thomas stopped to take on water, the two carriages fell fast asleep. "Shall we wait a while?" asked the fireman. "I'm tired as well." "We can't," said Thomas. "We have to deliver all the mail before people get up in the morning." Just then, the driver looked up at the sky. There was not a star to be seen. "We'd better get a move on," he said. "I think a snowstorm is on its way." Reluctantly, Annie and Clarabel woke up. Thomas and the mail train made good time, but even so, dawn was breaking when they arrived back at the engine shed. The Fat Controller was waiting for them. "Well done, everybody," he said. "Make sure you get a good sleep now. We should have a crane ready to put Percy back on rails tomorrow, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to go out again tonight." "That's all right," said Thomas, as he shunted safely back into his shed. "We enjoyed ourselves, didn't we?" But Annie and Clarabel were sound asleep. His driver said, "Good night," or "Is it good morning, Thomas?" Thomas looked out of the shed window. He thought to himself, "I must ask the driver to fit the snowplough when he comes back," and then fell fast asleep. By the afternoon, the island of Sodor was covered in snow. Thomas, Annie and Clarabel were rested and full of energy. The driver fitted the snowplough and they set off back to the mail depot. There, Percy was feeling foolish and thoroughly derailed. "I really am sorry about this, Thomas." "Don't worry," said Thomas. "The Fat Controller told me he will have a crane over here by tomorrow, so you don't have long to wait." This time, Annie and Clarabel were enjoying the night's work. It grew colder and colder. Because he was working so hard and the fireman kept stoking the boiler, Thomas didn't notice. When they were crossing the bridge over the river, he suddenly heard a quacking sound. "It's a duck," Thomas said to himself. "What's he doing awake at this hour?" "Help!" quacked the duck. The driver looked over the bridge at the river. "It's Donald's duck and she's frozen," he said. "The river's all ice." "Help!" quacked Donald's duck once more. "I've damaged my wing. I can't fly and I can't get off the ice. I'm very cold and I'm quite hungry." Thomas explained the situation to the driver. "Oh dear," he replied. "It won't be safe for me or the fireman to go on the ice, but we just can't leave her there. We'll have to call for help." Thomas whistled loudly for about 10 minutes. For miles around, lights came on in the houses as people wondered who was making all that noise in the middle of the night. But no one came to find out why. Thomas tried again. "Shh," said the fireman. "I can hear something." In the distance was the whirring sound of Harold the helicopter. Thomas whistled again, and before long Harold was hovering overhead. "Evening, Thomas," he called. "I'm on safety patrol because of the bad weather. You know, rescuing people and that sort of thing. It looks as if I'm needed here. Well, you can depend on me.